G'day, Peter Falson here, multi-base software support engineer from Zumasys, and today I'm going to take you to the debug zone. Right, let's have a look at a small program that I wrote specifically for this demo. Mainprog.b, very small program, just builds up a dynamic array in a for loop, calls the subroutine which does a similar thing, and then it comes back, and if it finds Fred in the dynamic array, it executes run prog, another jBASE process. If you're not familiar with find stir or find string, it's a bit like locate. Here's a man page for you. But enough of that. So let's get started. There's many ways that you can kick off the debugger. You can do a Control-C or a break if you're running a program. You can put a debug into your program and compile it and catalog it. Or my preferred way is to run a program with the -JD option. Now, if you're going to do this, the -JD needs to be the first option. So if you have a program that supports other options, then do the -JD first. There's also a -J capital D, and the difference is that the capital D says hit the debug or drop into debug for any programs that are executed. So if we want to debug run prog, then we would drop into debug if we use the capital D. So I'm just going to use the lowercase d at this point. And you can see it's dropped into debug straight away. Notice it's on line 2. The reason it's on line 2 is because line 1 is a comment. So it's dropping at debug at the first available executable line of code. And it shows me the line of code I'm on. And I can step through this now one at a time, and it shows me the lines of code. Notice it's skipping over the call subprog because I'm using capital S. If I use lowercase s, it now drops into debug, and I can debug the subroutine. That's just one way of going down into different routines for debugging. Another way is to use the F option. I can do F on, and that's a toggle, so F off toggles that. And then I can just use go now. And you can see it says file name trace changed to mainprog, so I'm now back in mainprog. Go again, now I'm back in subprog, and so on. The F option kicks in when there's includes. For example, I've got a rather large program called EB, which is my editor. Straight away it's actually gone into an include, but if I do it F on there, you can see it's dropping into various bits of code. The ones where it didn't show any code, like ebinit, is because it was in a different file name, and in that case it's actually an include. So if I wanted to drop into eb.NIT, for example, which is an include, I could say b f equals eb.NIT. And if I do a go, now I'm in eb.NIT. Now, notice it's not showing me any code because it doesn't know where it is. But I know where it is. So if I set up my path using the p command, now I can see the line of code step through. And well, actually, there was only one line of code for that. That was the call to jBASE in it. So we're now into something else. Now we're back in EBNet. That's just to give you an idea. But I think my favorite debugging technique, and again, this is probably a good example of that, is this has multiple subroutines that are going to be called, and let's say that I wanted to debug the help routine, which is something that you saw a second ago. So if I say b $f equals eb, well, actually, because eb, my editor, is a visual thing, I'm going to show you another debugging technique which is not available for Windows users, but Windows users, don't tune off yet, there's more to come. So I'll get the device name here, then I'm going to sleep for a long time, and then I'm going to go back in here and say do a remote debug to PTS1, and now I'm back in here and I'm going to say I want to break when I'm in dbhelp.b. Also notice too, I'm doing a .b there. I suffix all my basic programs and subroutines with .b, and that's for IntelliSense and also being able to use jcompile, which is another format of compiling, and that's only available for basic if it ends in a .b suffix. So even though the subroutine is called eb_help, the source is actually eb_help.b. So now if I do a go, this program carries on, and I'll go back to this guy, select maybe select main prog, and now if I want to say what's the syntax of an if statement, I press F1 and it's dropped into ebhelp. It's dropped into debug in ebhelp because that's what I told it to do. The only slight glitch in the remote debug is that when it hits a breakpoint, it drops back into the original running session. So if I wanted to, I could switch that back to the other one. And then I could single step through and see what I want to see. Ending out, I'm now back in this guy. So let's go back into debugging main prog and show you some other debugging techniques. Let's say I wanted to break when we're in subprog.b and j is greater than 5. Now notice I use GT instead of that symbol, and the reason for that is that the greater than and the less than can be used for redirection, and so you can't use the greater than less than symbols for that. Greater than equals is fine, and less than equals is fine, but just not greater than or less than. You have to use the alpha numeric, sorry, not the alpha numeric, the alpha version of those commands. So I've set my breakpoint, and let's see how that works in action now. So now if I do a go, it actually says the breakpoint that I specified, and I can maybe display a bit more of the program to get an idea of where I'm at, and just to show you, /j is 6, which is greater than 5, and I'm in subprog. Now you notice here I have if I equals 20, then debug. Now the for loop for I is 1 to 10 and j is 1 to 10 also. If I start that again, you'll notice if I do a go, never hits that breakpoint. So if I do an F space on, well, or rather, maybe if I just single step, let's single step using capital S with a lowercase d, and maybe go for 9 lines. Yeah, you'll see that stepping through 9 at a time. You also notice there's a bit of delay there. Oops, I can't do up arrow. So if I want to do S-D 1, that stands for 1 millisecond. Less of a delay, useful if you want to debug and watch a whole lot of code run, but you're impatient like me. So let's see what I is now. I is 9. So we've got one more iteration to go. So let's change. Well, actually, let's start again. Now I is going to be 1. Let's change I to 20. And then we hit that debug. Not a great example, but that just wanted to show it's useful to be able to change a value of a variable, especially for situations like if you know the code is going to go into a certain area, branch somewhere, or maybe be used in some calculation or expression, and the variable that you're looking at doesn't have the value that you were expecting or that you want to be able to go in a certain direction in the program, you can use the v-m option to modify the contents of the variable. If we step through this bit of code here, you can see that dynaray has a bunch of things in there. And if you recall, well, let's go to bash. I prefer being able to look at the program in my editor. So you can see that it's going to execute run prog if it can find Fred. Exit bash, we're now back in the debug. But dynaray is never going to have Fred in there because it's only being built up with the result of I to the power of j. But if we were to say, do something like -m dynaray 2, 3, actually that might not be a good example. Let's do -m dynaray 1, 3, for example. Stick Fred in there. Let's just make sure we don't have any other breakpoints. Okay, now if we do a go, and now it's actually running run prog because we modified the dynaray to have Fred in there, so the find string actually kicks in. You notice here it says press X to exit debugger, Q to quit proc. So we're actually in a proc, and I've actually turned debugging on in the proc. So just to briefly show you what's going on there, even though this is a basic debugger section, I figured I'd show proc debugging because not many people know about that. So here's the proc, PQ proc. Could be a PQN proc, the same thing applies. And if you want to put debugging in, this is the only way to do it in proc. You can't do a break or anything like that. But if you can put debug space on anywhere in the proc that will be executed. I normally find it's simplest just to put it after the PQ. But if it's a really large proc and you know it's going to hit at a certain point and you don't want to have to step through the debugging process, you can put the debug on wherever you need. But it's quite a useful thing. You can toggle the input and output buffers, and you can see what's going on there. And it's useful for seeing exactly what's happening with LE buffers, because it's rather than having to echo them or put PW or PP commands in to see what's going to happen, you can actually step through and see exactly how the buffers are being manipulated as you go. So that's just a bit of a debug session. Back into our main debugging. Let's run it this way. If we do an F on And let's say I want to break on line 7 in main. So let's do a 7 main. Now we're back in main. Oh, actually, no, tell a lie. Let's turn that off. So now we're in this guy. B minus M dyn array. Let's just change it to Fred. Now, you see we're now in debug of jpq.b, and that's because I said main prog-jd, so that's going to drop into debug every time it executes another program. Well, the proc processor on jBASE is a program, so now it's hit the debug for the proc. If I do a go, we're in the proc debugger, and now we're running exec prog, and so it's dropped into debug again because I gave it the -J D option. One last thing, just to show you some other debugging techniques, or rather variable manipulations. Actually, let's set a breakpoint for f equals subprog.b and j greater than 3, for example. And so we dropped there. And let's say we thought, well, yeah, that's a useful breakpoint, and maybe I've got multiple breakpoints set up, but perhaps we missed the bit of opportunity to do what we really want to debug, and we have to start again. Rather than having to set up those breakpoints again, I can say, maybe save it to breakpoints. I'll call it .txt so I know what it is. Now, if I run this again, do a go, and it's hit our breakpoint again. Very useful thing that, and that less than there, that's an example of why you can't use j less than 3, because that less than is used as a redirection to pull in commands. You may have seen me do !bash. Go to bash prompt. For Windows, you would do !cmd. Now, if I wanted to, I could edit that break. And so now I'm in Vi. If I wanted to, maybe I could say, I also want to do that when it's 8, for example. Exit. Now I'm back in the debug. And let's say, oh, I also want to do set something else while I'm there. So 2 exclamation marks runs the last exclamation mark command. So that if you use the exclamation mark command to run the command shell for whichever platform you're on, then it's useful just to be able to run double exclamation mark and go back into that. So I could then edit that, and maybe I might want to do a T of I, for example. So it's hit our breakpoint, and now we've got our trace turned on as well. Back in this program, actually, let's turn that off. I actually want to be in the main program. That really is one of the most useful breakpoint settings there, especially if you're debugging your way down into a subroutine level, and you know that you've done debugging the subroutines, but you actually want to debug back in the main program. If you know what the main program is, you can do a $b$f equals whatever. If you've forgotten what the main program is, if you do a j minus g, the very first process is unknown, but it tells you what the source code is below that. So that gives you a clue. And if there are multiple subroutine levels, you'd see all these other different levels of where you've been called from. So now I do a go. I'm back in ev.b, and I want to show you, if you do a /* it shows you all the variables in this program. And if you're not a speed reader like me, you probably didn't catch all that. So what I like to do is redirect that to debug vars bash to view that, and now I can say by debug vars. You don't have to use vi, you can use any editor, and now I can scroll through and search for what I want to search for. Maybe that didn't work, did it? Well, enough of vi. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's say we see that C reserved. And let's say for debugging purposes, we decided we need to change. Maybe there was a typo. Maybe that ASM1 is supposed to be just ASM. So I could say v minus m, C reserved. And you see that I've just changed that first value. Now, I could use any array of reference there. The other thing you can do that's kind of neat, and that also works with something like, oh, what did I type? Oh, I've mistyped it. And it was 0 bytes because it was 1, 3. Oh, I used the wrong dynamic array reference there. Let me start again. There we go. That's better. So now I'm showing 2 characters from position 2. So as you can see, you can do all sorts of things like that. Another good example would be, if we go down here, I can say, what is dyn array I, j? So you don't need to know what I and j are to reference that. If I and j are variables, then you can just do that whole expression. And if I wanted to, I could say v minus m dyn array I, j. Two. There we go, we got 2 there now. So that was it for me. Have any questions? Go to docs.jbase.com, search for jBC debugger or proc debugger if you want to look at the proc debugger. All the commands are there. There's plenty of documentation there and some examples to help you through. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you next time.